Everybody, DIY Dad here, and we are in the basement today because I got a problem. This is the coolest room in the house. It's sitting right now in the mid 70s because while we were gone over the weekend camping, the blower motor on the furnace went out and didn't throw any kind of warning, just stopped turning, which caused the air conditioning to do the air conditioning equivalent of overheat, which was to freeze the coil and turn it into a big block of ice, which froze all the lines, which then impacted the outdoor unit and essentially shut everything off, even though everything stayed powered and energized and running for a day or two. At least that's what I assume happened. I wasn't here. So today, we're gonna try to replace the blower motor in my Trane XE90 furnace and see if we can get things back online, because it's gonna be 95 degrees tomorrow, and I'm not looking forward to that. So here we go. All right, so here's my furnace. It's Trane XE90, and I've already done a lot of the diagnosis on this, which is how I know what the issue is. And I've ordered parts so we can do the repair video. But in the furnace, this is the box that my filter sits in, which is over there. But when you pull this out, you can see the little squirrel cage fan that exists for the furnace. And the issue that I have, if I turn everything back on, is this fan, which is supposed to spin and push air through the entire house, isn't. I've done a little bit of effort trying to get it to move again, got it unfrozen. I couldn't even turn it initially, but as it fires up here, you're going to see my problem. So that's the issue. It's obviously not ideal. I need to replace the blower motor. We're going to do it ourselves. First things first, we're going to shut off the breakers for the furnace, drop the gas line, or turn off the gas to the furnace as well, just as a precaution, and then we'll get things disassembled. So I'm going to do that, and I'll be right back. All right, the breakers are off both to the furnace as well as to the air conditioning. Also got my gas line turned off, so we need to get in here. So we're going to have to pull the top cover and then the bottom cover to get access to this. Top cover is easy. You just pull up on it like this. It's easier to do with one or two hands. This pulls up and then pivots out like so. We can set that aside. And then the lower cover is very similar. It's actually just in with like a pressure fitting that pushes it down. So you just kind of grab it, you can pull it up and out of the way. Now inside, there's this little safety catch which prevents the furnace from operating if the lower cover is removed. Then we have an access panel, or a control board rather, and we have the squirrel cage down below. Now the cage itself and the blower is really only held in by two bolts. There's a screw on this side and a screw over on that side that need to be removed. But first and foremost, we're gonna have to pull this guy out of the way, which means we have to get this one out of the way. So there are screws here on the top that you're going to undo to pull this switch out. I've already gotten them loosened. On mine, they are 8mm. I'm not sure what they'll be on yours. Yes, there's a little bit of rust in here. When the AC froze over, all that moisture from the coil, which is up here, evaporating, all that moisture dripped down and this whole area pooled. And unfortunately, galvanized steel, it got wet and it rusted. So that's not ideal, but I'll clean that up later. Right now, I just need to get this thing going again so that we can cool the house down. So, two little screws right here. That's going to allow this switch to come off. And then there are two screws for this control board kind of mount that go up that we're going to take out as well. Those are also 8mm. The mount itself has two tabs, which are back here. So what you end up doing is, once it's unscrewed, you just pull this whole thing forward, and that'll kind of free it up and allow it to move. So I'm going to pull the screws out for this, and we'll move to that next step. All right, so all four screws are removed. So this guy's just going to I'm just going to let this lay free. Be careful not to put too much pressure on the wires. And then I've got the control board released as well. So you can see this whole thing just kind of flops around in here. As I mentioned, there are two tabs on it. Now, before I pull this loose, you can see we've got these wires that run back. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take a picture of where these wires are connected, specifically the polarities. So where the yellow, the red, the black, the blue, and the white are connected, so that I can reconnect things in the same way. You'll also see wires down here. There's a capacitor which allows the blower motor to fire, If you are replacing, if you're replacing your blower motor, make sure you get the proper sized capacitor. A lot of the old ones were 5 amp. These new ones are more like 15. So just make sure that you're sizing one appropriately for what your blower motor requires. I have a new capacitor with my blower motor, so we'll be replacing that as well. So I'm gonna take a picture of these. Actually, I might just use this video that I'm filming right now for this. But I'm gonna unplug these wires for the blower and let those sit off to the side, like so. They're just little spade terminals, so they pull right off. You don't need to unplug the others, at least for how I'm considering doing this, because I'm not going to actually remove the control board. I'm just going to deal with the blower and kind of set this out of the way. So I'll thread that wire back through. This guy can stay attached. Those guys are over there. So then the entire control board assembly, you can kind of grab and you can walk it towards you and it'll come loose. And I've got some drain lines I'll have to disconnect. So I'm gonna put my phone down, pull off these plastic drains for the water flow, but then this entire circuit board can just kind of swing out of the way. All right, so I got the control board set aside. Again, being careful not to put any strain on anything. That frees up my blower motor. These guys just move out of the way. The next step is gonna be to pull the entire squirrel cage out. Now, as I mentioned, there are 2 screws. There's one here and one here, and then there are these kind of clips, which I'll try to show you later because I got a bunch of stuff in the way, to make a channel that this slides into. I'm not going to be replacing the fan itself. I'm actually just doing the motor, so all of this is going to get reinstalled the way it was. Now, with these 2 screws removed, the whole thing can slide this way, but you're going to have to clear some space. So you can pull this guy out of the way to give yourself a little bit of room. That's going to open up it a bit. The other thing that you'll need to do is back this hose up and out of the way and then pull this little fitting, so it's going to have to slide right through this space and it just doesn't fit otherwise. So get that out of the way, get that fitting out of here. It's just a little pressure thing, so you can kind of work your way around it, get it to release, and it'll pop up like that. I'll just set that out of the way, and that'll free up enough room that this can slide out. Now that's going to take 2 hands, so I'm going to do that and I'll come back. All right, so here's the squirrel cage fan. Not the appropriate name for it. I don't know what the actual name for these things is, but this is removed from the system itself. Now, to get the blower motor out, there's 2 main steps. We have to undo the fan from the little shaft of the motor itself. You do that by pulling this screw right here. I'm just using an adjustable for that because it's a square head. Should be pretty easy. And then the blower motor has 3 screws that hold this little bracket into the back. Now the fan is going to stay captive in here, and depending on how long you've had this thing installed and how old your setup is, it may or may not come loose. I know that mine is able to just be loosened because I've tried it, but if you can't, if your fan is kind of welded onto this bar, what's recommended, rather what I've seen done, is to use just like a deburring tool to take any of the corrosion off of this and get this as clean as possible to allow this to come off, but then to use a puller which will grab onto this and push against there and allow that to be popped loose so that you can actually separate these 2. Again, mine's been serviced in the last several years, so this comes off pretty easy, so I don't need to do that, but there are pullers that you can get that will allow you to kind of force the issue and get this to pop loose if you're struggling with that. So I'm going to loosen this, and then I'll take the 3 screws out on the other side. They're all 8mm. The 2 screws that were holding the squirrel cage into the furnace on mine were 10mm, but just sort of go with what you've got. I don't know how original any of this hardware is. All this stuff is 25 years old, so it's been serviced and worked on by who knows how many people at this point. So I'll get this loosened, and then we'll take the screws on the other side, and we should be able to pull the blower free from the squirrel cage. Okay, so then as I mentioned, so I just loosened this, and you can see the fan now slides back and forth on this, so it is loose. So I know that I can pull the blower out through the back. Okay, I've got the 3 screws holding this bracket removed, so this now can pull free like so. Before I can pull it out, however, I do have to deal with this. So this is the capacitor. I am going to be replacing this. It just has a couple of spade terminals on it, so these can be pulled loose like so. and that'll let the motor come free. And then this is just a little band clamp, so I just pop one side or the other and that'll free the thing holding this in place, and then the new capacitor will go in its spot. So I'm going to pull this out. Our next step will be then to remove the brackets that hold the motor in place from the motor itself, which will then allow us to hopefully get the new motor installed in the existing brackets, reattach it to the squirrel cage. Okay, looking at the armature here, you can see there's 2 screws per leg, and they're holding things together in kind of an interesting way. So there are 2 pieces to this. There's this top part and the bottom part, and they kind of sandwich around the motor itself as they slide. But they're adaptable for different thicknesses of motor. So a wider motor, it's still going to work for this with these little adjustments. These screws go through both the outer piece of metal and the inner piece of metal. So I'm gonna have to remove all 6 of them, so 2 per leg, to get this removed. I'm gonna take a look at and mark the holes that they were in. I think the motor that I have is a direct replacement for this, so I should be able to reattach it in exactly the same way and get all my spacing correct. The other thing of note is there is a ground wire that comes off of the motor that grounds to this cage as well, so you'll need to adapt that with your new one as you go. Mine's actually sandwiched under this bolt, under this arm of the cage. So I'm going to pull off all 6 of these, get this disassembled, and then we'll go grab the box from Amazon and my replacement parts, and we'll get her hopefully put back together. All right, so far so good. Cage came apart easily. There were 2 rubber fittings I'm going to keep that went around the motor itself, which I think allowed it to kind of not vibrate in there. So I'm probably going to have to reuse those. I haven't looked at the new part as well. Now, once we've gotten this taken out, you can see the part number that we're dealing with here is 5KCP39HGS599S. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's actually the replacement that I've got. This is the original GE motor. The new one is a Climatech, but it's supposed to be a direct replacement for this part number. So I'm gonna go grab that. It was pretty highly reviewed on Amazon, so hopefully we're gonna have pretty much a drop-in replacement. We'll see. So I'm gonna go grab the parts, take this guy and set this out of the way, and hopefully we can get the new one installed. All right, so here we have the replacement part. It is geometry-wise exactly the same as the one we pulled out. This is the Climatech part. I'll link it in the description of this just so you've got it. But otherwise, functionally very much the same, a little bit more venting surface than the old one had. It does also come with its own little rubber grommets for the top and bottom to space it in the cage. And it's the exact same wiring as the previous. So I've got the same wires, same connections, same everything. I also have my new capacitor. That's going to go over on the side. And as you can see, this one is a 15 MFD, which the other was a 5. So this is scaled for this motor to allow it to start and run properly. So we're going to get that swapped as well. The other thing I'll mention is while I had it apart, I did go outside and clean this up as best I could. I don't know if you could tell in the previous clips, but this thing was filthy from 25 years being installed in this house. So took a pressure washer to it, cleaned it up as best I could, dried it off, and it's ready to get reassembled. So I'm going to do everything in reverse of what we did before. So this will get reassembled in the cage and placed in there. We'll swap that guy out, reconnect my wires, and at that point we'll be ready to slide her back in and plug the control board back in, get her fired up, make sure she spins in the right direction and that she spins at all. And then hopefully I will have a functioning air conditioning again, fingers crossed. All right, motor is reinstalled, new bracket went on just fine. There's a lot of flexibility in where this motor exactly gets placed. There's lots of room in the cabinet. The only thing to watch out for is make sure that the legs, these brackets that come off, are just spaced equally around. So if you have to go one hole further up or down because of the way it aligns around the motor, don't worry about that so much. Just make sure that you're even, which I am. I've also got the capacitor replaced. The previous one was a 5, so I'm glad I swapped that out without even knowing it, because the new one does require a 15. So make sure if you're doing this replacement, you do the capacitor too. Next step then, I'm going to get this placed back into the cabinet, then swing the control board back over and get her plugged in. One thing I will note, there is a notice here about the proper rotation angle. So you see how this is turning this way, which means I'd be turning clockwise as we look at it from the side. So you want to make sure when you test this, make sure it does spin the right direction. You're not going to get much performance out of your furnace There is a method within this to reverse that polarity. I believe it's switching these two wires, which will make the rotation switch. Most of them are set for clockwise just by default, but we'll see, make sure that that's the case when this one gets put back in place. So I'm gonna get her slid back into the cabinet, move all that stuff out of the way, get the control board in place, and then give her a shot, see what happens. Before I slide this in, I did want to show you, so there are those little tabs that you can kind of see sticking down from the back here, and this edge right there needs to slide into those tabs. So as you get it placed, you're gonna kind of want to tilt it back like this towards you, and make sure you get those to thread into that channel so that when you slide it in, that'll hold the back, and then the front will be held by those two bolts. To show you a little bit better what I mean, so there's the tab, and you can see I've got the channel going in there. It's the same on the other side. So when I slide it back, it'll go between those two other tabs and hold that in place. All right, so we're slid back into place. I'm not going to worry about bolting this in yet, because I'm just going to do a quick power on test to make sure that this motor does spin and spins in the right direction. So all I'm going to do is swing the control board back, run a screw into that, and then I'll probably just hold this button down so that I can test fire it with the cover off. And then if that works, I'll get everything put away and secured properly. Oh, and since I forgot to say it, make sure you tighten up that screw first before you test fire the motor. Okay, now we can go. Woohoo, success! Which is good because I am sweating like crazy down here. So I'm gonna get everything buttoned up and put back away, and then I'll close things out. But yeah, pretty easy project all told. Just takes a couple sockets and a ratchet and a little bit of time. Not too bad. Back in a second. All right, we have functioning, running air conditioning in my home once again. The only thing that I regret about this project is when I cleaned out the squirrel cage, I used a degreaser that I've got, and the smell of that is now being blown through my home, which is a little bit less than ideal. I'll deal with that sometime down the line. I'm gonna let the temp come down in here about 10-15 degrees first, and then if I have to Febreze or whatever, I'll air out the house tomorrow. It'll be fine. All that being said, this was about a $350 project, I think, for the new blower motor and the compressor, or sorry, and the capacitor. Took me all told 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes with stopping for filming. So not a huge deal really even to do, just took 2 sockets and a little bit of time and a little bit of willingness to experiment. That being said, this is a gas-fired appliance. If you are not comfortable working with appliances like this, don't. Hire a professional, talk to somebody who knows what they're doing, definitely go that way. Don't go out of your comfort zone too much when things like this are in line, because the consequences of doing this stuff wrong is pretty huge. I'm a little bit more comfortable with it. I've worked on things like this before, so here we are. My family sweat a little bit, and it saved us about $1,000 on the estimate I got for this type of repair if it was just the blower motor, by the time you factor in trip charges and everything like that, and having to deal with someone trying to sell me a brand new furnace when all it needs is one little part. So that being said, this is the end of a DIY dad video, so I of course owe you a dad joke. So what do you call an alligator wearing a sleeveless coat? An investigator. All right, remember, with any DIY project, most important step is just to do it. No one's going to see the flaws unless you point them out to them. Have a great night. Stay safe. Catch you on the next one. Bye.